At the beginning of the story, we meet Louise Harrington, the director of admissions at Columbia University, begins her routine workday. During her lunch break, she meets her ex-husband, Peter. Despite being separated, they still share a warm, familiar bond. Later, Louise returns to her office and notices an envelope addressed specifically to her. Inside, she discovers an application form from a student named Scott. Something about it catches her attention, and she decides to offer him an interview. Scott appears nervous but agrees to the interview, and they set it for Monday. That evening, Louise visits her mother, Ellie, who seems a bit unsettled when Louise mentions that her brother, Sammy, will be visiting. After her mother leaves the room, Louise retreats to her own space. There, memories from her high school days flood back, particularly of the time she had a heartfelt crush on someone named Scott. Now, holding his photo printed on a business card, she finds herself caught in a wave of quiet nostalgia. The next morning, Louise heads downstairs and finds that her brother Sammy has arrived. Curious about recent family events, she asks her mother about their last gathering. Ellie quietly reflects, mentioning something that deeply unsettles Louise. Scott, the applicant, apparently has no known relatives and, heartbreakingly, had passed away on the very day of the scheduled interview. Later, as Louise sits in anticipation of the meeting, a wave of uncertainty washes over her. To find clarity, she calls her close friend Missy, asking whether Scott ever used a particular phrase that stood out in his letter. Missy warmly recalls that Scott often said that phrase and would always smile brightly, even when running late. Comforted by the memory, Louise thanks her and continues to wait. Eventually, Scott shows up, smiling, and Louise is struck by how much he resembles the boy she once adored in high school. As Scott begins setting up his presentation slides, a soft knock interrupts them. It's Peter, asking if he could stop by that evening. Louise agrees gently, and Peter quietly walks away. As Louise reviews Scott's presentation slides, she's genuinely impressed with the quality of his work. Scott, confident yet calm, tells her he feels good about how it turned out and believes he has a real chance of being accepted. Without asking any questions about the program, Scott unexpectedly excuses himself and starts to leave. Caught off guard by his sudden departure, Louise instinctively offers to tell him more about the university, hoping to keep the conversation going. Though slightly puzzled, Scott agrees to hear her out, and they eventually find themselves at Louise's home, continuing the discussion in a more relaxed setting. There, as the atmosphere softens, Scott suggests sharing a bottle of wine. During their quiet exchange, he gently holds Louise's hand, tracing her arm with a tender curiosity. The moment naturally draws them closer, and they share an emotionally charged embrace on the sofa. Afterwards, Scott, now slightly uncertain, asks whether their shared closeness might impact his chances at the university. Louise quickly regains her composure, gently shifting the topic, and mentions she should return to the office. Before leaving, Scott proposes they spend more time together later. Louise, considering everything, suggests they space it out and plan future outings on different days. Using her phone, Scott calls his mother, who encourages him warmly, though he remains a bit distracted by Louise's sudden change in mood. As he finishes the call, Louise stands nearby and softly asks if she could take a shower before heading to the office. Back at her office, Louise sits alone, revisiting Scott's presentation slides, lost in thought. Just then, her phone rings. It's Missy, her outspoken and humorous friend, who starts chatting about her latest interest, a man she jokingly refers to as her future Uber driver, despite being married with twins. But mid-conversation, Missy notices something off in Louise's voice. Concerned, she gently asks what's going on. That evening, Louise reconnects with Peter, and their conversation unexpectedly turns heavy. Peter opens up about meeting a woman named Sammy, who had turned to him for help with addiction. Louise is caught off guard. This was something they never spoke about during their marriage. It hits her that Peter might have been silently seeking support elsewhere. He admits that each semester, when he received a student roster, he would feel the urge he had promised to resist. Louise struggles to believe him, but Peter defends himself, calling it a disease, something he thought she should understand. He confesses that, in the past, he unfairly blamed her for not noticing his struggle, while trying to keep up the image of being flawless. As he reflects on how Louise had always stayed true to herself, she rolls her eyes in quiet frustration. Peter, sensing the moment slipping away, asks her to leave. Louise, feeling emotionally overwhelmed, quietly sank into reflection while tidying up her home. Her heart was heavy with memories and unresolved emotions. Just then, Scott arrived and embraced her warmly, sensing something was wrong. He gently asked if she had been crying. Louise opened up, revealing that she had recently uncovered a painful truth about her ex-husband, something she had never fully confronted until now. Scott offered quiet comfort, reassuring her with patience and understanding. Louise, still vulnerable, promised that the past wouldn't come between them. They shared an evening filled with tenderness and emotional closeness, allowing themselves to be present in the moment. The next day, while out together, their affectionate behavior was lightly interrupted by someone playing pool nearby, calling out to keep things appropriate in public. Scott laughed it off and went to greet his friend Ricky, introducing him to Louise. Ricky joked about Louise not believing their friendship, which led her question Scott. With a playful smile, Scott explained he needed someone to care for Louise and humorously mentioned a brunette with twins named Missy, realizing only then that he had mistaken Missy for Louise during a previous phone call. Later that night, the couple returned home, where Scott, still curious and concerned, gently brought up the topic of Peter. Louise, touched by his sincerity, responded with openness, deepening their bond even further. The next morning, Louise wakes to find that Scott is gone. He had gone to visit his mother. Feeling emotionally fragile, Louise breaks down in her bed and confides in Ellie that Peter is now in another relationship. Her mother gently comforts her, sensing how deeply it still affects her. Later that evening, Sammy stops by for a piece of Ellie's cake, but the mood quickly shifts when Louise confronts her about Peter. She questions why Sammy never told her about Peter's addiction. Sammy explains that Peter had asked her to keep it a secret, and soon, the conversation turns into a heated argument between the siblings. Unable to bear the tension, Louise leaves and heads to a hotel where Missy is staying. At the hotel, Missy casually brings up Scott, and Louise grows curious. She asks how Missy got involved. Missy shares that she had called Louise's home after first trying to reach her at the office and ended up speaking with Scott. That conversation, Missy says, made her feel youthful again, not like a woman constantly juggling work and motherhood. She recounts meeting Ricky after finding Scott's mother's number in the phone book. When Louise asks if Scott is with her now, Missy confirms they've been spending time together and that Scott has been asking about Louise. But when Missy claims she never mentioned Louise and Scott's past, Louise grows visibly skeptical. Missy brags about the progress she's made with Scott, even as Louise quietly excuses herself and heads to the bathroom, where she lights a cigarette, clearly distressed. There, she finds Missy's notebook with Ricky's name and number written on a sticky note, and slips it into her pocket just as Missy enters. Feeling overwhelmed, Louise admits she's been trying to match Missy with people she might genuinely connect with. But in a sudden twist, Scott and Louise are interrupted by Missy, who accuses Louise of trying to stop her from being with Scott. Missy claims Scott broke up with Louise for her. Then, with guilt creeping in, Missy confesses that she feels Scott belongs to her, even beyond this life. She apologizes, but Louise, shaken, rushes out, promising to tell Scott everything. Missy warns her that doing so would destroy everything. Louise arrives at Scott's place, where he's already waiting for her. With tension lingering in the air, she gently asks if Missy had mentioned anything to him about their recent conversations. Scott responds briefly, sensing that Louise has something important to say. But before she can fully explain, Scott, feeling hurt and misunderstood, says that maybe Louise is simply tired of him, tired of the person he is and the life he brings. Trying to gather the courage, Louise finally opens up. She confesses that Missy has taken away someone very dear to her, her high school boyfriend, someone who had once meant the world to her. She also admits that he tragically died in a car accident, leaving her with a pain that never fully healed. Surprised, Scott reveals that they share more in common than he thought. As the weight of the moment settles, Louise prepares to leave. She tries to maintain her composure, suggesting that sometimes, when people go through emotional turmoil, moving on seems like the only option. But Scott doesn't agree. He calmly tells her that he isn't looking to argue and chooses to walk away, leaving Louise standing there, lost in thought. Louise arrives home, her eyes lingering on a painting she made herself. As she moves through the quiet house, she's surprised to find Peter sitting alone in the dark. Despite everything, he offers her some comfort. The next morning, Scott returns and finds Peter resting on the couch. Louise tells Peter that Scott is applying for a job. Louise tells Peter to leave, but instead, the two men begin joking together, breaking the tension. Louise steps in and gently escorts Peter out of the house. As he leaves, Scott suddenly storms in, accusing Louise of lying and being unfaithful, claiming she spent the night with her ex-husband. Louise firmly denies the accusation, insisting that nothing happened. Their argument heats up as they discuss how overwhelming everything feels. When Louise mentions Scott's name, he laughs and reveals that his real name is actually Francis Scott. He admits he just thought the name sounded cooler when he proposed it. Then, Scott teasingly tells Louise that he never really saw her as an artist, but more as part of himself. He mocks the painting he made for her, trying to hide his deeper feelings behind sarcasm. Louise turns to leave, but Scott follows her, confessing that he saw Missy the previous night because he couldn't sleep. He leaves Louise standing there, confused and frustrated. Louise then meets Missy and confronts her about what happened with Francis the night before. Missy jokingly says they spent the whole night talking until sunrise, but then she admits that she gave Francis a drink that night. Missy confesses that her interest in Francis was because Louise had left him, which left her feeling confused and hurt. They talk openly about the argument they had the previous night and the painful things they both said. Missy advises Louise to stop fighting with Scott and to try to heal her relationship with him. Time passes, and one day, Louise meets Peter. They both admit that, despite still loving each other, they will never be able to fix their relationship. They secretly agree to move on. At the university's seminar room, where artwork is displayed on a big screen, Louise meets Peter again on campus. They have a private conversation in her study. Louise hands Peter an envelope, smiling warmly. Meanwhile, Francis learns that he has been accepted into the program. Louise attributes his success to his hard work and dedication. Grateful, Francis thanks Louise, and they share a gentle kiss. And with that, their story comes to a close. So friends, what are your thoughts on Louise and Francis's journey? Was it a second chance at love, or a lesson about healing and moving forward? Share your feelings with us in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you in the next video. Until then, stay healthy, stay safe.